Welcome to another episode of Angels, Positivity, and Love. Our guest this week is Beth Bell in California, flower whisperer, intuitive coach, helping CEOs and many others, author, show host, TV, radio, has done a lot, seen a lot, and is still on her journey and going to be teaching us even more in the future. I'd like to welcome Beth Bell to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you, and you have had so many experiences to date. You spent some time after ditching the corporate world, and I've got to mention you were a top sales exec that then switched gears and got into strategic branding in pharma before realizing this wasn't quite, it was satisfying at one level, but it wasn't quite doing it for the where you are when you're here. And so your journey grew or expanded. You ended up in Bali. You were designing jewelry and doing many other things. Your photography, flowers. You're known as the flower whisperer. I'd love to get to your journey. I'd love to get to all that you do, your offerings with your books, your journals. You have a lot of those. And for folks who want to check out your website, it's www.bethbell.me, M-E. But so if you could take us on a little tangent, a quick personal story. You've told it to me before, and I have not forgotten this. It's the living room moment, but you might have to set the tone for where you are in your journey. And it was a very special story that, again, has resonated with me all these weeks or months later.
Yeah, well, it's actually many years ago now, but I was always really in tune with spirit. But there was a time in my life where I'd gotten a little bit out of tune. I got married, did the whole white picket fence thing, and then got the message that I needed to leave that marriage. It was just like super clear. So I left the marriage and I was living in an apartment, and my soon-to-be ex-husband had called and said, "Hey, I'm going to be out of town. Can you come take care of our dog?" So I thought, oh gosh, I have to go back into the marital property energy. But yes, I love my dog. I'm going to do this. So I go back to the house and I'm laying on the sofa and I'm reading a book. And I should also say that as much as I was connected, like I was always more scared, not about who would walk through my door, but who would show up or appear. So I had this sort of interesting relationship with the spirit realm. Like I wasn't 100% ready. And I think because I knew that it was there. And so I always kind of had this in the back of my mind. I didn't like to stay home alone, like those kinds of things. Well, so I'm laying on the sofa. My dog is next to me. The fireplace is burning, and it's a beautiful scene. And I've got a book in my hands, and it's I think it was Mindful Loving by John Bradshaw. So nothing about angels or anything. It was just like a very loving book. I'm reading, and then all of a sudden, there was this energy that just came into the room. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I felt like I was just kind of peering over the top of my book. And I saw these 5 people show up in my living room. They had flannel shirts and blue jeans. And I was like petrified. I was like, this is like my worst nightmare. And then all of a sudden, this energy just went right through me. And it was like, you're doing the right thing. Keep going. And I was like, oh, because I had been questioning not getting divorced, but I was really just toying with, why do we have to leave our loved ones behind on the awakening journey? Like I knew my soul was quickening, and I knew that I was on my spiritual path, and I knew that he wasn't supposed to be on it. But it was hard because I got married and I wanted to stay married and I wanted to live that whole, dream and, all the plans that we'd set in motion. And so the angels just knew that I just needed that extra little loving push and swoosh that said, you're doing the right thing, keep going. And then I was just sort of like petrified in a moment, but I felt so good because it was just like this whole love that flowed through my body. And then I was like, oh gosh, okay, thank you. And then I went back to my book, and then, my mind was playing with me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, did I just make that up? Is this my imagination? And so I struggled with the experience for a while because I didn't want to call it real. Like I thought, am I just like sort of crazy? And then I was like, but I know I'm not crazy, and I know it was real. And they were so beautiful and a little bit translucent, but they were definitely physical bodies because I saw the flannel shirts and the blue jeans. They all looked like they were in their 30s. And it was just an incredible experience that I think was probably one of the many catalysts that started to nudge me closer to the spirit realms and to my guardian angels. And so that was the gist of the story. And then of course it goes on from there, but that was a really nice way for my guardian angels to show up and let me know that they were there and encourage me to keep going.
It's a beautiful story, and this isn't to make fun of it in any way because this is just how I refer to it. It'd be like the Bee Gees without the facial hair and without the '70s costumes, more dressed down, showing
Yeah,
up, a rock band, saying hi and really showing up at the right time for you. Can
yeah,
we take it sideways because the challenges you've been facing and just mentioned, wherever a person is at in life, is almost the way the brain functions. We have to have something to seize on as an obstacle or something that'll chew up our RPMs. So instead of being creative, more loving, and more open, we always tend to do the spinning or the eddy. If it's a river or a current, we tend to get trapped a little bit in our thinking. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've learned after all these years on when you catch yourself thinking a lot? How can we all slow down up here to be more present? And it doesn't matter where you are on your journey, and we're going to get to your journey in just a second.
yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of that advice?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all on the journey. I'm sure anyone listening here is on their journey. And, over all this time, I had so many things that happened with my soul quickening that I knew that I needed to just keep going even when things didn't make sense. So that's what I talk about in my book. And honestly, I always wanted to write a book, but I wanted it to be like the five pearls of wisdom or the three tips. I didn't want it to be all about my life and the vulnerability and the success, but the failures, right? The big love and then the big heartbreak. And so through all of that, I learned, I think one of my techniques is intuitive risk taking, and which means that I get a hit and I do validate the hit, and then I move forward with it even when it doesn't make sense, even when I know that everyone around me can say, wait, why did you do that? And I know that I'm not going to have like the data in this third dimensional realm to say why I made that decision. And that gets, that gets to be difficult sometimes, because as you go through and you sort of ascend to different levels of risk taking, intuitive risk taking, yeah, the stakes feel like it's all perception, but they feel like they get bigger. And so as you start to let go of all of these things in your life that you think are either important or that you need to survive, or whatever it is that the mind comes in and tells you, you just have to keep unraveling the constructs, the thought constructs, the collective consciousness that reflects back to you how to fit in, how to be normal, how to make the right decision. And it's like, no, it's like the right decisions are always deep within you. You just need to get in touch with it. And that's where, the journey takes us on some wild rides. And yeah, and there's ups and there's downs and there's all arounds. But at the end of the day, everything is here for our awakening. Our relationships are here for our awakening, whether it's relationships with others, our relationship to life, our relationship to our job. And it's doing the inter-reflective work to really know what that relationship is reflecting to us, so we can make decisions and choices based on our deep inner knowing and our intuition, not what our mind tells us, right? And I have a strong mind and I love my mind, but my mind often is not serving, my highest good. So it's really that practice of knowing, when you're listening to your ego mind or you're actually in flow and listening to spirit. And so, yeah, I like to talk about getting the ego mind in the back seat and letting spirit drive. And I'm good at that, but I'm also great at letting the ego mind drive. And that's like putting a 2-year-old at the driver's seat. So, that's when chaos happens. Then you go, wait, no, I'm letting the wrong energy drive the car, get in the back seat. And so, there's lots of tips, tools, and techniques as to how we keep that mind, in check in the back seat.
You've just touched on so much in terms of hopefully what we can cover later, which is how do you know when you're up here, down here?
Yeah.
But can you talk to us more? And you mentioned this earlier, trusting the inner route, the inner path, trusting your heart more, making sure you're following the real life path. Obviously, everyone as a kid is doing that, but talk to us about how you started to trust your heart more. Was it only Bali? Was it the corporate world? When did you start to sense, was it when you were
Yeah.
younger? Talk to us about the different points, the
Yeah.
waypoints where you started to trust this more and really let go.
Yeah. Well, part of it was that awakening kiss that happened for me that we didn't talk about, but that was what started my soul quickening. And that's what told me I needed to leave my husband, not because of someone else, not for greener pastures on the other side, but because I wasn't awake and alive at the level that I knew I came here to be and experience in this lifetime, and that the relationship was numbing me, not awakening me. And so that was part of it. But then that led me, into deep diving into everything spiritual. I ordered hundreds of books, at that time from Hay House, and I was on the circuit, listening to everybody, and got into A Course in Miracles, and really started to understand the multidimensional aspect of being human. And so that also got me into meditation, right? And so everybody says meditation, 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 but my mind was so strong that I would sit for 15 minutes. And mind you, I was in my corporate job, and I left my house at 7 a.m. and didn't come home until 7 p.m. And I didn't feel like I had a lot of time to meditate. And every time I tried, I'd be like, I can't get that 15 minutes back. And there's like so many things I could have gotten done, right? So I had this in the back of my mind that I knew I needed to meditate, but I just couldn't figure out how to do it. And so the universe said, buy a nice camera. So I did. And I went to Hawaii. And, before that, and this is like when we didn't have, iPhones and all that. So you had to actually have a proper camera. And I had photographed like architecture and different things, but I had never photographed Mother Nature. And I got to Hawaii, and like before I even got to the beach on the first day, Spirit called me over to this orchid, and I started photographing these orchids, and I just like was mesmerized, and I fell into this like, this sort of trance state, right? And I'm just photographing and photographing and photographing, and I'm seeing the details, and it's just like taking me over. And now I look back at all that, and I go, that was just the universe's way of getting me to meditate, right? So it just quieted my mind, and then I was just in the flow with Mother Nature. And then I took my camera everywhere, and back then it was one of those big clunky ones, because it took really good close-up photographs. And so I started photographing and photographing and photographing. I would take my camera everywhere for work, not necessarily into meetings, but I would have it with me so that if I went for a walk in the morning, I could photograph flowers. And then eventually I realized that when my mind was quieted, that I was getting downloads, and I was like, oh, the flowers are speaking to me, right? So I would be getting these messages, and then a friend of mine said, oh, you're a flower whisperer. And I was like, a flower what? And and I'm still in my corporate life, so I'm like, flower whisperer like didn't quite fit, but I was like, it fits. Like, yeah, I'm a flower whisperer. And so and then I just realized that it was really my higher self, providing me with these messages through the flowers, because my higher self is connected to everything and flowers. And so, yeah, that was a huge thing for me, because it really got me into that meditative state, in a way that was palatable to me. And so, yeah, so I had lots of time to meditate when it came to photographing flowers.
Okay, so for the flowers, besides orchids, what else did you shoot, if we don't mind me asking?
Yeah, any flower that called me. It's like, it's an interesting relationship that I have, because I'll literally be walking, and then I feel like I'm literally called to the flower. Like the flower tells me, come to me. And I just like zoom into it. I don't know how it happens. I just hear it, and I go into it, and then I just photograph it. And I didn't know what I was going to do with them. I was just doing it to photograph. I really didn't have a plan. And then I was walking with a dear friend, and she really wanted to do a power walk, but I couldn't stop, because like they're calling me like crazy to stop and take a photograph. So I knew she was annoyed with me about kind of ruining our walk, but I just had to do it. So before I left, because I was just visiting this friend, I found these cute little albums, like tiny, like 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch. And I bought the album, and I made little tiny photographs of the flowers, and I put it in this album, and I called it a flower bouquet photo album. And I gave it to her, and she was like, oh, this is so cool. It was sort of like, my way of like having a truce on our disagreement with the walk. It wasn't that it was a disagreement, but it's just, she had a different goal than I did, and I wanted to be more meditative. So that was like, oh, wow, I really love these little flower bouquets. And then eventually created them and made them in Bali. And then that blossomed into my whole product line, and then eventually the store in Ubud, Bali, which is called Blossom Bliss. So so my whole life has been really guided by flowers. They're certainly a form of a guardian angel for me, and they inspire me with everything that I do. I don't photograph as much these days. Like I don't stop all the time, but I have to say, like yesterday I took my dog for a walk, and the flowers I walk by that are right outside my house, I see them every day. I haven't photographed them in a long time. And I was walking in, and this one calla lily, it had like this tiny, you know how they have the tiny little end, and there was this little drop of water. It was just like sitting right at the end, and it just said photograph me. And I'm like, of course. So I came in and grabbed my camera, went back out, and just, you know, photographed it from so many different angles. And just, you know, when you look at this, it's like the suspension of that little, you know, that little bit of water that's just hanging there, right? And it's just like spirit saying to you, just go out on the edge, just hang out there, right? It's like if you have no fear of falling, you're just sitting in like pure consciousness, you know, pure energy and guidance. And so yeah, so I just always love to encourage others to just look a little bit closer, because there is a reason why people say, you know, stop and smell the roses, right? Because we get so busy. We're just busy, busy, busy. And sometimes the most miraculous, most moving, most touching things are just right there under our nose, and we're not even stopping to smell them. So that's how my relationship with flowers happened. That's how it continues to happen. And I just always appreciate the reminder that the flowers bring me to be in that connection of flow that brings the grace and ease that everybody says that they want, but they're too busy doing other things to actually feel. When it's here, it's available at all times, as you know.
So for your Bali business, does it, the silver jewelry designing, does it also incorporate the patterns of flowers in the jewelry sometimes?
You know, well, I have a bracelet that's not actually available, but they do. And this was a power cuff,
Oh,
and it says in here, I am powerful. And so it was about the power of flowers. Yeah. So you know, I have them. I just don't have them available online right now. They're out of stock. But so this is one of the things that's flowers, but most of them are like the mini mantra word bar necklaces, where there's a mantra on here. I am grounded, I am present, my heart is open, bliss. So there's a bunch of mini mantras that are on here, and bliss stands for beautiful, long lasting, irreplaceable, spiritual, and still. And I recognize that bliss is being demonstrated all the time through flowers and through relationships. So that's how the bliss acronym, and that's why Blossom Bliss came to be. Yeah, so it was all just divinely guided by the flowers, and then all the products. My earrings are also mine, and there's flowers in them. And so yeah, it's been really fun to have the flowers influence everything that I do. And I never dreamt to have a shop. That was like not my personal dream, to have a retail store in Ubud, Bali, like a brick
yeah.
and mortar store. But that was spirit too.
What's the fastest way a person right now can check out your offerings? Is it Facebook? Is it a website for Blossoms Bliss?
Well, they can go to bethbell.me, and I have the necklaces on there, but blossomblissbali.com has all of the products on there. Yeah. So the little photo bouquet albums that I talked about are on there. Yeah, there's lots of different things that are available. Yeah, and
Perfect.
it's
And
all about
shipping to America, no big deal. It's all in the fine print. People can click and just get it done.
Yep. Yep, because we distribute out of the US. Everything is made in Bali. It's handcrafted by incredible heart-centered Balinese artisans, but it's all being sent from the US. So unless you're in Australia, it wouldn't come from here. But yeah, so it's easy that we can get it to people fast. But it's all about empowering pure love and purpose. So there's vibration infused, and that's why, in fact, how the flower albums came to be is I had no intention of actually creating them in Bali, but on my first self-created sabbatical, where I found myself in Bali for a month, I happened to show this little album and said, yeah, I've been looking for a manufacturer. I want someone that can, you know, infuse the intention of love into the product. And I just mentioned it to someone here, not thinking, or here, I think I'm sitting in Bali. And they said, oh, you can get those made here. And I was like, no, I didn't think, you know, it's so humid, and the paper products and the quality and whatever. And then like the little butler guy that I had helping me, that I was staying in a villa, he said, I have a manufacturer. And like literally the next day, this manufacturer showed up. I didn't go searching for it. They made the albums for me. There's 7 different colors from the colors of the chakras. And yeah, and boom, that first product was made. And so it just all flowed. So that's when you know that it's not your mind telling you to do something, because everything just showed up. It just lined up for me, and I didn't know that I was going to create like a bunch of different product lines and flower affirmation cards and all these different things. Spirit just guided me along the way, and I just followed it.
I love it. So, hey, I know we're jumping into something next. Who knows which direction it'll be, but If we can pause and take exactly what you just said at that level and apply it to the audience, do you have the message of just stay in there, stay the course, everything's going to work out, trust more? What big picture message, looking back at all of that, can you give to every single audience member? Because we're all, again, all on our journey, and we all go
Yep.
through the ups and downs where we're like, oh my God, this just happened. This just happened. I don't feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. Can you give us the pep talk on why it's okay?
You just have to trust your intuition. Look for validating points, but just trust your intuition. And for me, it's like I feel it in here. It's not a thought. It's like, it's not, well, can I make money on this? It's like, no, it's like I'm inspired to do this, and then let the universe bring everything to you. Look, I'm also guilty of forcing things. Like I wanna make it happen. I want to do it. And I've done it. And a lot of times it doesn't work. And not because it's not supposed to work. It's just because I'm supposed to get myself out of the way. And so it's always like just coming back to center, am I trying to do this? Or am I the vehicle of which this is supposed to come through to be done for myself or for humanity, or for my contribution? And so that's the sticky part, I think, that we're always in, is just allowing. And I also have challenges with receiving. We get so ingrained with doing and then getting reward, the if then thinking. And the Balinese taught me, forget about that if then thinking thing. Of course, yeah, if I do this, then there's option A, B, and C. But they're like, yeah, we don't think about that. Just do what makes you happy, like be in the happiness, stay in the happiness. And when it came back to the United States, it was my reverse culture shock was much harder than when I went and lived in Asia for 7.5 years. I started in Singapore in my corporate job. The reverse culture shock was a lot harder than the culture shock was, because I had been deprogrammed, and I got back in the environment of the programs, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, I have to do that, and the mind comes in. And so that's, we always have to monitor our minds. And that's another thing that I talk about in the book, and I talk about a lot, is mind monitoring. I got rid of my TV in 2005. I highly recommend it. We're just not aware sometimes of the programs that are constantly being thrown at us, and belief systems from outside of ourselves that aren't for our highest good, that aren't from in our soul's plan. And they're just so innately ingrained in our external environment that we don't see them. We don't even sniff them out. So I'm just saying, just stay awake, alert, use your discernment, go deep within, feel into. But a lot of times we get told, well, it's not about a feeling. Like, does it make sense? And it's like, no, it's about a feeling. It's about a feeling. This isn't about making sense. And the more you trust, the bigger you're going to get in the jumps you're going to make. Right. And so, I mean, I happened to start one of my big jumps was getting a divorce, which is actually a pretty big jump. But then, then they just kind of kept coming, the jumps, and they keep coming. And they keep getting a little bit more challenging. And then, yeah, because everybody outside of you've so perfectly, all of us have set up these characters to come in and, poke us and make us go into our fear-based place. And, Course in Miracles always says it's either fear or love. What are you acting out of? What are you making a decision based on? Is it fear? Or is it love? And so it's always, and you'd asked me before we came into this, just what's the mantra that comes in for this show? And the mantra that came in is only love is real. And that is the essence of what we need to remember too, is that only love is real. And yet everything in our external environment tries to tell us something different, well, forget about that stuff, and it tries to tell us, romantic love is the thing. It's like, well, it's not. It's nice and it's fun to play in, and we can all have it, but only love is real, the vibration of love. And so, yeah, I know I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, you did great, incredible. I want to go back to Bali, the people of Bali, the Balinese. Can you talk to us about how they embody love to the point where it helped flip the switch for you? You were talking about how you learned the lesson of not being up here. It's love first. Can you give us practical cultural examples of what instructed you?
Yeah, I mean, they were so amazing. I lived in this beautiful house literally out in the middle of the rice field, and I had this Balinese rice field worker that was right outside my house. And he was super happy to always help me. And I loved that. I loved him. He loved me. We didn't really, we didn't know each other, not romantically, but, just like as a person. And so he'd always help me with this, with this motorbike, because I'd have to walk into this property. You can't drive a car there. And he'd always give me a ride. And he would do it with such non-attachment. Yes, he would love if I gave him money, which I did. But when I would say, well, how much, how much for the ride from here to there? He'd say, up to you, up to you. And he was so grateful for whatever it was that I gave him. He had zero judgment about what I gave him. And yet he had no money. You look at his shoes and they're like, the flip-flops are like, almost like, nothing's left of it. And you give him, the going rate, I don't even know, like I'm just making it up now, but $5, and $5 is a ton of money to him. And yet he doesn't expect it the next time. And you're just like, gosh, how do you do that? Like, how do you just go through life, like loving exactly where you are, even though you have nothing? He takes me to his compound and I'm like, looking at the kitchen, they all live together and they all just support each other. And then I started to realize, like, it's us Westerners. We brought all these not stupid, but we brought all these silly ideas to them, because before we came, they didn't know that they needed a new motorbike or the fancy cell phone or any of these things. Like, we started to teach them the greed. We started to teach them, money and acquiring things and identity with the material world. Whereas they didn't have that. And a lot of them still don't have that. So a lot of them are just still happy working in the rice field, being in Mother Nature, helping out. You need help, I help you. You help me. It's just, it all is a wash. It all happens in whatever way, right? So they just constantly taught me about being in the present moment. And it was the hardest thing for me, because I opened a business there, right? So I opened a business. And I'm still thinking, I come from a massive corporate job where I'm working with, high profile people, high profile, Fifth Avenue, New York City agencies. We're all smart, we're strategic, we get paid for our mind. We get paid for scenario planning, strategy. And I come to this rice field to live in this villa and to, open this shop, which was not my idea, as I said. And now I'm trying to run a business in a Western way in Bali. And that is like oil and vinegar, right? And so I'll tell one more funny story about that, and then we can go on to something else or whatever you want to ask me. But, I thought one day, I'm like, okay, incentive plan. I come from sales. I started in sales, and then I went into marketing for most of my career. Incentive plan, I'm gonna give these ladies in my shop incentives. So I don't know what it was. I think it was my flower bouquet photo albums. I said, okay, if you sell this many, then you get this bonus or whatever. And I made this little poster and I put it in the back room, and I was all excited to share this with them. And they looked at me like I had 10 heads. And as I was explaining the program to them, and they looked at me and they go, it's just karma. Like, if someone buys something, it's just karma. And I was like, okay, you're right. Took the poster down, laughed at myself, and I was just like, this is crazy. Like, and I still wanted to hang on to it. I'm like, no, it's not karma. You guys are salespeople, but I didn't mean that they had to be like true salespeople, but I wanted them to talk about the products, right? And share about the products. And so then we had one rule after that. And the one rule was that when people leave the store, that they felt happier than when they came in. And if they bought something, great. And if they didn't buy something, great. So it wasn't like it wasn't meant to be a hard pressure to sell as much as it was, I wanted people to know, like, there's inscriptions on the bars and, to share. And they just weren't quite in that energy. We did find a happy medium, and they did go to a place where they could actually tell people about, these are this and these are this. But yeah, as far as like incentives, I mean, and you couldn't reward them with money, even though they didn't have a lot of money. I paid them higher salaries. I gave them bonuses, but that just, there was no motivation. I was like, oh, I'm going to help these, they just happened to be ladies in my store. Like, I'm going to help these ladies to have a career, you know, they're they're going to speak better English, you know, they're going to have these skill sets, and then they can go anywhere in life, you know. And they were just like, and I'm just really happy like living in my family compound and having babies and being married to my husband. And it was just like, what? You know, so everywhere I went, everywhere I turned, Bali just kept, you know, kept teaching me, even against like all of my programming, yeah, what it's like to just be in the current moment of now. And I struggled a lot with it, but I made leaps and bounds too. So
Yeah. And it's like
yeah,
trying to teach Picasso how to paint when you're, you know, they're already in their place doing their thing. Talk to
yeah,
us though about, again, Bali's a big destination for seekers. There's a
yeah,
lot of people who suspect something's up and they could be headed off to Machu Picchu, Egypt. You know, it could be Hay House authors, it could be Bali. And then there's a
yeah.
lot of groups in Bali as well. And we'll leave that alone. But just talk to us about how trusting your own path, that it's going to be unique and that the universe is going to find a way to show you that everything's your instruction. It doesn't have to be Bali, but talk to us
Yeah.
again about how each person out there watching you right now, they've got something coming and they only have to invite it in and just pay this much more attention and watch what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I always say the things that I have the most resistance to and the things that I hear myself say, I'll never do this. I know I'm just about to do. So for everyone else, I would say just pay attention to what you hear yourself say, because and what other people say to you, right? So whether it's a trigger or a glimmer, other things are constantly reflecting information to you, as you just said. Just pay attention to it, right? If it's a trigger and it's something that makes you feel a certain way, just feel into what the feeling is. And sometimes it means you need to go directly into it, as opposed to walk around it or avoid it or shove it down. It's like just sit with the feeling. And for me, one of my tips and tools that I use is remote writing. And it can be as simple as just you sit down with the journal and the pen, and I can just say, why do I feel so sad? And I just let the pen answer the question. And oftentimes, you know, I'll look back at that and go, who wrote that? You know, it's like, of course I wrote it, but because it's from my guides, and it just tells me, you know, exactly what's happening, and it just kind of flows out. And again, it doesn't take that much time to do that. It takes a quiet moment. It takes, you know, allowing the TV to be off, or the whatever is in your house. You know, maybe it's that you have children and you just need to go sit on a park bench or whatever, but that 10-15 minutes that brings you back to center, as opposed to the swirling of everything that goes on in your mind and everything that everybody else is trying to tell you that necessarily isn't valuable for you, but it all has meaning. So yeah, it's
Mm.
just really listening to everything that's happening in your environment, and being present with it, and not numbing yourself. And numbing yourself is spending all your time on your phone. Numbing yourself is sitting in front of Netflix. I'm not saying like don't ever do it. I'm just saying those are all programs. And while it might feel relaxing to sit and watch Netflix night after night after night, you are not listening to your intuition. You're not feeling into your own inner wisdom. You're allowing the programs of everything else to come in and infiltrate your subconscious mind. Like one of the examples I like to use, and I love both of these programs, and I'm not saying there's anything good or bad. I'm just saying that, you know, like Friends, that was so popular so long ago, and a great program. And a lot of times you feel good, but there was also a subliminal programming in there that's like, well, if you don't have a group of friends that meet at, you know, Central Perk coffee shop or whatever it was, you know, that people also felt isolated, or like, oh, well, I'm not that, or oh, I'm not popular, or I'm not this. And so there's always sort of these little infiltrations that, if you're not aware, can really have an impact on you. So again, I'm not saying like don't watch Friends. I'm just saying that you don't always recognize the subliminal subconscious programs that really start to get ingrained in you and create these circuitous loops of thoughts that take you down a road that are not of a higher vibration. That's not that they're evil. It's not that they're bad. You know, it's something like Seinfeld, you know, that's a great show in the sense that it was just always making fun of yourself, you know, and always just laughing at things that happen in life. And so that had a little bit more of a lighthearted, you know, you felt a higher vibration in a sense, because yeah, it just kind of, oh yeah, that's funny. You know, yeah, we're silly. So anyway, so it's, yeah, that's part of, just stop the insanity of the programs that are being thrown at you, the news, you know, all of that stuff. It's like,
Sure.
step away.
It strikes me as Ted Lasso. I think that's on the Apple program
Yeah.
stuff. That's
Yeah.
got a super high vibe. It's crazy how
Yeah.
high a vibe that is. What can people do just randomly during their day, like 3 to 5 suggested steps to sort of break from the mold instead of Netflix? Is it take a cup of tea outside? Can you just give us 5 random acts of kindness we can show ourselves to just break the routine?
Well, first I would say go smell a flower, go look at a flower, photograph a flower. If you're not into flowers, just go out in nature, just be in nature, because there's a blade of grass, and we see this with children. We see how they look at a blade of grass or a rock and they're like, oh, and you're like, yeah, we need to get back to that, right? We need to get back to the majesty of the magic that is around us all times. You don't have to be in Costa Rica or in California or in Hawaii to get the essence of the power of Mother Nature. So just go outside, put your feet, on the grass, something that just grounds you into nature. That would be the first and easiest thing. And even if you're in, because I grew up in North Dakota, like even if you're in cold North Dakota, you could still just go outside and take a really deep breath of air that might be 30 degrees, but you're still connecting with the energy. You're still just making a conscious effort to say, I want to connect in. So it doesn't have to be this beautiful scenery that everybody thinks about. You don't have to go on vacation to take in the magic. So that would be the first one. And then I do think if you have an active mind like I do, writing is great. Journaling. The trick that I always like to highlight is that sometimes when we sit down, we still want to control what we write. And we still, like, when you start to listen to yourself question whether that's the right word, you're not remote writing. So you write whatever word comes to mind. It's almost like the words are coming faster than the pen, and you're just a journalist at that point. You're just documenting what's coming through. Whereas sometimes people want to try to force it, and they want to try to evaluate what the mind is telling them, which then you're just still in the mind, right? Because then you're trying to write a story. And it's like, in the beginning, I used to scribble so bad in my journal because I didn't want anyone else to read it. Like if somebody found it, I'm like, oh, I don't want them to, and now I'm just like, it doesn't matter if I died, unfortunately or unexpectedly, and somebody went through all my journals and read all my stuff. I'm like, great, like it just doesn't matter. But that's a different point to hit. Yeah. So journaling, you said 3 to 5, those are only 2. The easiest one is to take a deep breath, right? That's the easiest one. And to feel the breath go in and just feel the air. And I think the other thing that the Balinese taught me is just to be so grateful for just the little things. Living in Asia, having clean water. Having clean water was a really big deal. Having access to clean water was a really big deal. And I think a lot of times we take these things for granted in first world countries. Having clean feet, I really liked having clean feet, because we don't, and I still don't wear shoes in my house, and you don't there. And so sometimes, you just want clean feet, and you just go, oh, thanks for letting me have clean feet. Something we don't think about in the first world. So sit in the gratefulness of the little things. There's always something to be grateful for. Yeah, I mean, I would say those are the top ones. There's so many more.
You mentioned the Balinese and breath work. Is there a specific,
Yeah.
did you have an instructor there, or did you do any sort of coursework there?
I did go to several breathwork sessions, and I was really excited about it because sitting back, way back when I first had left my husband, I was in New Jersey, and somehow I got this book on conscious breathing. And I was like, at that time, I was like, I have no idea what that could possibly be. And it didn't quite resonate like I wanted it to, but it didn't quite, I just couldn't, like, I read the books, but I couldn't quite get into the breathing. And so when I went to Bali, I did that. And for me, I must have been in so much resistance at that point, because I would get the tendonitis, where your fingers get really, really cramped and you go into like a Charlie horse. And so I didn't have like as great of experiences with some of the breathwork sessions until much later. So I do think that's a great thing to do, and you can access, other dimensional realms through breathwork with facilitators. And so I highly recommend that as a tool. It's just one that doesn't work as well for me all the time, because sometimes I just get too, there's just something about it. And so I think, breathwork is great. But I also think, just if you get an opportunity to try a modality that sounds wild and crazy, do it. Because that's one of the other things that happened for me in Bali was living in Ubud. It was like this, you know, the spiritual Disneyland. There was everything there. I mean, I thought I had seen everything until the breatharians came to town, and I'm like, wait, you do what? Wait, you're going for like a fast without any food, any water, and you're living on air and prana. You're staring at the sun in the morning and the sunset, and that's your food. I'm like, wait, this is crazy, you know. So that one was a stretch for me back then. But yeah, there's so many different modalities that everyone else is going to easily tell you is crazy. They're going to tell you it's silly, that, you know, it's your imagination, it's this, it's that, the other, and just move beyond all of those narratives, because there is something really beautiful in all these different techniques. And there's, you know, millions and millions of ways to find your way home. We've all designed ours uniquely for ourselves. So it's about your journey and how you're going to do it. It doesn't matter what, you know, he's doing, she's doing, they're doing. Find what works for you and do something that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, something that makes you feel like, is this legit? Because that'll push the envelope for you. It'll push you just a little bit more into, maybe there's something more. And you start to unravel your mind, and you start to unravel the programs. And yeah, one of the other things that comes to mind to share was, I just absolutely love this in Bali. A friend came to visit, and she went to do family constellation work. And I was like, yeah, I have a really good family. I just like, I think I'm okay. She said, well, will you go with me? And I said, absolutely. So I went to this family constellation session, and she had asked a question. And so the whole family constellation was about her. And at one point, the facilitator looked over at me and she said, are you in? And I was like, this is my first time saying, I go, I don't know, but I'm just really angry. And she goes, you're in, jump in. So, you know I should probably explain what family constellation is, but so I'm like, okay, jump in. So I was assigned to be my friend's great grandfather. And in that moment, I just started channeling his energy. I mean, I still knew I was Beth Bell, but it was like, I was angry. I knew that I had impregnated my wife, but she told everybody it was rape, because at the time, way back then, it was like looked on poorly. And so she was trying to be this victim, and yet, you know, it wasn't rape. And so all these things were happening. I was so upset with her. I hated this woman I didn't even know it was like playing my wife at the time. And just all these things were happening. I was just feeling all the emotions. And so, a long story short, I was so hooked to do family constellation work. I volunteered twice a week, left my shop to go and do the work with people for their stories, because every time what I realized was that I was able to feel emotions so much more pronounced because they weren't mine. And so I allowed myself to not have a block to feeling something about my own storylines. And when we do that, we start to open and open and open, and we let the energy out. And so every healing that took place for the person having the session was a healing for all of us. And then you go, oh yeah, we really are all connected, you know. And you start healing like ancestral wounds. And you know, we had people from all over the world, because it's Bali, and, you know, a lot of people from Australia. And you start to see the prison wounds that came over from all the prisoners, right, from when England shipped them over to Australia. And, oh my gosh, you know, and I was playing the devil and God and money and the energy of all these different things. And then it's just undeniable, because you felt it yourself. You felt what it's like to be the energy of money, or the energy of a 9-year-old girl, or whatever, and you act out these things. So that was something that, yeah, I thought, oh, I have a great family. And then boom, it turned into like, wow, there's so much to heal ancestrally for my family, for me, but for humanity, right? So so step into to different things that maybe you go, I don't think I need this, or I don't know about this, because if it's being presented to you, there's probably a reason for it, and there's usually some juicy nuggets. So family constellation work is something I highly recommend for people to get involved in, even if you're just a volunteer and it's not about your story, because your story is going to come in.
That's beautiful. Okay, so you help others in an intuitive way, multidimensional way. You're a coach, business coach that way, but also personal coach. Can you tell us a little bit more about can people come to you for a 15-minute consult, or is it really just these days they've got to book you for a minimum of an hour? How do you operate?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Thank you. It's interesting. I'm actually not a coach. I don't call myself a coach. I probably sound like a coach, and that's probably like a really great word to say, but I'm an author, I'm an advisor, and I'm an entrepreneur. But those are all just like,
Multi-dimensional advisor. I'll say it that way.
yeah, a multi-dimensional advisor. But to be honest, those are all code words, because the invisible thread through all of it is that I'm an awakening agent. I'm just here to shine the light and show the way. And so if someone wants to ask a question, or they have something that they want help with to transform in their life, whether it's something about a relationship or something about their life, come to my show Sundays, 11:11, every Sunday. It's Unravel Your Mind. You can come on via Zoom. You can come on. It's a live show on YouTube. But if you go to the Zoom link, then you have access to me and you can ask your question. If you can't make it live, which most people don't, just send me a PM on any of my social media network platforms. I'll incorporate the question. I'll answer it on the show, and then it helps everybody. So that's why what I started to realize is that, one-on-ones are great, but the conversations I have on one-on-one are one to many, because so many other people have the same question, maybe a little bit different detail, or a little bit tweak here, a little bit tweak there. So Spirit said, it's a one-to-one, like where I'm answering a question, but it's on a one-to-many platform. And so I've just actually recently started my Unravel Your Mind show because of that. And that it's really about, when we ask a question, it helps so many other people. And so, yeah, that's where I would say for people to go for guidance if they want something specific.
Okay, so let's do a lightning round as if it was a game show or something like that, or a late night talk show in that fun segment. It's going to be basic yes or no, or you're going to choose just between two options. So right now in your life, tea or coffee?
Tea.
Okay. And if it's just
matcha tea.
Ooh,
very specific.
Okay. And making it yourself, the grinding, the whole
I don't grind it, but
Okay.
that sounds nice. I could, yeah.
Okay. Now, only one flower can exist for the next 2 months. You're going to be surrounded by this flower. Which flower is it going to be?
Lotus.
Ooh, now why lotus? Because of the metaphor?
Yeah, because a lot of times we feel like we're in the mud and we're trying to control getting out of the mud. And a lotus flower does not have any, they're just in complete bliss in the mud. They're in complete bliss when they can't even see the sun, I'm sure, in the mud, right? They can't see the North Star. They just know the North Star is there, and they just surrender and they go, okay, I'll just blossom whenever I'm supposed to, whenever I get enough water, whenever I get enough sunlight, whenever it comes. It's kind of like, it sounds funny to say, but it's kind of like an orgasm. It's like whenever just flows, you're like, okay. And that's such a beautiful example, the lotus flower, and then boom, you come out and you're like, and I'm here and I'm blossomed. And then even the death process is beautiful. I've photographed a lot of dead lotuses, not because of the death part of it, but because there's still so much beauty left in it. And then it just recycles and then it blooms again. And that's life, like sometimes we feel like we're up and sometimes we feel like, oh, damn it, I'm down, like everything's pounding on me. And then sometimes you're like, oh, wow, everything's aligning, and it's just staying in the ebb and the flow of it. And, I'm so guilty of when I'm down, it's like, oh, I want to focus on the disparity of why I'm down and how did I get down? And I know how to be up and why is, it's like, no, just be the lotus in the mud, just stick in the mud, just stay in, in that warm, cozy place and let the universe support you.
Okay. Now, a trip to Bali, if it was happening a week from now, and you're not allowed to see anybody that you're not allowed to go to the places you're not allowed to do anything business-wise, and you can only choose one modality of healer, whether you know them or not. What's the number one thing you're like, oh, I got this in a cinch. I'm going to do a 2-day workshop on in Bali. What's the modality you would choose a week or two from now for you? Out of anything you can think of, if it was being offered on Bali.
Since we're playing the quick game, when you said it, I didn't hear the whole thing you're going to ask me. As if I were to just go to do one thing myself, I would go back to the water purification priestess, the high priestess that does water purifications. That's what I would do, just because it's such an incredible experience and it's not something that I can just do anywhere.
And you're in the water and you get cleanse?
You go to her temple, and she sits up on a very high platform. In fact, I have to look and see if she's still doing the water purifications, but she sits up on a very high platform. She blesses all the water in the temple, and you stand sort of below her. So she's above you, and she starts flicking these beautiful flowers on you and this water on you. And then she asks you to stomp your feet and to let it out, and then she starts pouring more and more water on you to where you're just being immersed with the water, and the water's just running over you and running over you. And she just keeps asking you, stomp your feet, let it out, let it out. And I've seen everything from people like screaming mad bloody murder to like hallelujahs, ahas. And yeah, and I've had all of it too in different ways. You never know what's going to come out. But it's like it comes out, and and all you have to do is just be willing to surrender to it. And yeah, and it's an energy that just flows through you. So but that's not something you would build a module or a workshop or a 7-day retreat for.
Sure, but that was a beautiful answer. Okay, log cabin, you got electricity, food, water, you're all set, but you're not allowed to leave the cabin until you reread a book you've already read. And this is a book that you don't mind going back to. What's the one book that you're like, oh, it's a cinch, it's going to be this book. Everyone should read this book. What book are you telling everybody to read? That it can't be your own. What would you go back to the well on?
Well, I just went back to the well on Eckhart Tolle's. It's not it's not The Power of Now, but it's A New Earth. Yeah, I had so long ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's right there, the orange kind of cover. And I would mention A New Earth for anybody who's having trouble sleeping. If you're in ego and you're in distress and you're sleepless nights, and a lot of my problem is your ego has to make a choice: let you sleep or read the equivalent of angelic writing. You will sleep like a baby one paragraph into that book because your ego would rather not have you read that book and let you fall asleep like you're at a bed and breakfast. So that's my tip for A New Earth, is what a great way to fall asleep and get the audio CD. His voice, his presence. How do you describe Eckhart Tolle when he's talking on those audio CDs or digitally? Do you like his voice? Do you find his presence incredible?
I actually prefer to read his work as opposed to listen to it, because sometimes I do get a little tripped up with he has a very different and unique voice. And I feel like I hear my guides speak to me through his words when I read it in a book. And I'm also one of those people that likes to make a little note on the side. So it's fun now reading this book, because I think I bought this back in 2005. And so I just pulled it out. I don't even actually have very many of those hundreds of books that I purchased, but this is one of them, and I kept it. And so it's fun as I'm reading it now, many years later, in a totally different place on my awakening journey, and all the little asterisks and lines and ear tags and all that, that I see. And I just go, oh yeah, that's so great. So yeah, I still like the hardcover books.
Okay, so give us a definition. Here's the next one. Give us the definition of the human journey, spirituality, going within. What's our opportunity to live more, love more? But this is your version of an answer here.
Well, what comes to me is it's time to wake up. Like, it is time to get out of the programs. This is such a beautiful time on planet Earth. We just went through we just went through this most amazing time with COVID and all these things that are happening. Get rid of the distractions. If it's whatever it is, if it's media, politics, the V, whatever it is, they're all distractions. Awaken. That should be everyone's main focus, is to awaken right now, because that's all there is to do. That's the only reason why any of us came here, is to awaken. And so yeah, that's just there's nothing else to do except awaken.
Okay. Angels.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite angel?
I would say Archangel Michael. I think because I had a situation where it was after I had slept with the devil in India, and I was pretty shattered. I was back in the United States visiting, and a friend of mine she was my hypnotherapist, and then I came back to her, and we became friends, and came back to her while I was here temporarily. She did a session with me to try to help me, and because I started to learn about life cords and how people can do psychic attacks and all these things, and I was overwhelmed by it all. And when she did this session with me, she said, okay, Archangel Michael is now here and he's installing all these little mirrors on your back to give you some protection for just reflecting the light right back out. And, so if anything's coming to you, that it's just like this. And I just remember thinking at the time, like, oh, I thought it was a little bit crazy, but I was like, I mean, not really, but I was just like unfamiliar with the technique. So I was like, okay, wow. But I could feel him there. I knew he was there. I knew what was happening. I could see what was happening. So it was undeniable. I didn't really question it. It was just a little bit shocking, maybe is the better way to say it. And so I've always felt a little bit of an affinity towards Archangel Michael as a result of that, because I was able to see him and his boots and the whole thing. And so, I would say probably him.
Okay, time in India, without getting into too much of the other stuff, talk to us about if someone's going to go to India, and it was like Bali. I mean, India's so much tradition steeped in centuries and centuries and centuries of, I mean, they've been there ahead of almost everyone else. Talk to us about the high points culturally. What can a person expect going to India? Do you recommend India or Bali first, or do you just recommend kind of getting the basics down in good old wherever they're at first in their hometown? Put India on the map for us and describe some of the highlights you had there.
That's a tough one. My first response is going to be feel into it for yourself, because whatever I have to say doesn't matter. However, my experience with India was very different for why I moved there and what I was doing there. So, and my experiences there are very different than what most people would have, because I didn't go there as a tourist. I didn't go there actually for the spirituality aspect of it. I moved there with a person that was my fiance at the time. And so I was doing a very different journey. I always think that, I'm a light worker and I'm going to attract people from the light. And so India for me was a very dark period. Everything about India was very dark. But when we embrace the dark, we know that the dark and the light are just in balance with each other. So it's not a bad thing, but it certainly felt like a bad thing at that time. So I don't have any recommendations on India, especially from a spiritual perspective, because I didn't go to the spiritual places. Very powerful, very moving. And there's a reason why their tagline is incredible India. And the word incredible can have very different connotations. So I'll leave that at that for India.
Is there another location around the world that you haven't shared with us? Was it Egypt, Machu Picchu, somewhere else that you found incredible to visit? You'd love to go back again?
I think Costa Rica does provide an incredible opportunity to be immersed in Mother Nature in a way that is, just feels really pure. But if you have the time, money, and energy, I would recommend New Zealand over Costa Rica in a heartbeat, because New Zealand is just so incredibly pure. If you go to some of the, I think it was Doubtful Sound. Most people go to Milford Sound, but I did an overnight in Doubtful Sound. And I just have not ever experienced that level of pure consciousness while on a boat with, I don't know, I think maybe it was 100 people or something. Maybe it wasn't that many, but we had a moment of silence and we all just sat. The entire boat was 100% silent, floating in the sound. And the pureness of knowing that everything around us was untouched by humans. Nobody lived there. The human energy was not as present as Mother Nature's energy was. So New Zealand is a place that I feel like people should definitely get to.
Can you spell the name of that second sound? Not Milford, but the other one that you said.
Doubtful, like the word doubt.
Okay.
And then full. Yeah.
So that somebody could be able to Google, or they could find it pretty quickly and try to get up to speed on it. Beautiful. Yeah. Good answer on that one. Okay. Now, last one for the sort of the lightning round here. What's your favorite pendant and favorite inscription, whether you sold it to someone else or it's one that you wear, of your own jewelry line? And remember, you've got these little pendants, Blossom Bliss, if I got that right. What's the favorite line, and that you might use over and over again from time to time, or what's an entire, you've sold 100, 2,000 of them.
Yeah, well, the one that I love the most, and the one that I thought was going to be like the top seller, is I am pure love bliss. But what I found was that when people came into the shop and I was showing them the different mantras, a lot of people said, oh, I'm not that. And I was like, wait, how do you not know you're not? Like, what? And it wasn't the top seller, because most people couldn't get there in their mind to know that they are pure love, because all they could see was their faults and their darkness and their, mistakes or whatever their mind was focused on showing them. And so, yeah, I am pure love is, yeah, I think the best mantra you can have.
Okay, what were the top 3 or so bestsellers that people could settle for, not to put it that way?
Yeah, yeah. Live life in love with everything is a big one. I am grateful one is no, I am grateful, knowing love, receiving love, bliss, and yeah, the live life and the I am grounded, I am present, my heart is open. Bliss was also a big one, just for people to really reflect into being grounded, but also being, having their heart open, because we so easily want to close our heart
Mhm.
when things happen, and it's like I heartbreak is the most beautiful time. It's not the easiest time, but when your heart is broken open, more light comes in, unless you decide to close it, and then you're just shoving stuff down. And so I think whenever we have heartbreak opportunities, it's the most beautiful time, because it's the time that our heart breaks open and we can expand. So yeah, so my heart is open is a really, really powerful thing to really embody.
Very nice. Okay, what's coming up on your whole career trajectory, your soul's journey, your journey as a healer personally? What's coming up ahead in the next year or so? Not to contradict what Bali taught us, and especially you talking about
Yeah.
Bali with us, but what can you share with us that's sort of where are you for the unfolding here on your journey in terms of your books, your
Yeah.
journals, and other stuff that you offer all of us?
Yeah, well, the first book, Angels, Herpes, and Psychedelics, is doing its magic. I've stepped into. I have a trilogy coming that I'm writing. The next one that I'm writing right now is the Romantic Love Illusion, and then it's the Worldly Wealth Illusion and the Spiritual Illusion. So all of those books will flow out and divine timing. But I'm also focused on advising CEOs, because I think that the books kind of go out to the masses and to all the people that are ready for that next whatever they are calling for in their journey. But it's also helping CEOs who are on that edge, because the CEOs can bring so much to their organizations through their own vulnerability. And a lot of times CEOs don't get vulnerable. And when they do, the people that are working for them have a much greater knowledge of where they came from, how they got there, and they want to work for them. As opposed to just like the person in the ivy tower, the person that's untouchable, or the guy or girl that makes the most money. And so it's really about helping CEOs to get into their awakening journey themselves, so that they can have the impact on their whole entire organization, but also use and leverage their company or their brand for the people on the outside. So the people that are a customer, or people buying their products, that they understand their story too, the why behind it, because that's really, really helpful. Because then we start to see, like some of the people who have some of the more influential roles right now talk about spirituality and awakening. And it really helps other people to see them leading as an example. So I feel very destined to continue to work with CEOs that are on that awakening spiritual journey, not the ones that are, completely numb and just in it for the money, but that say, yeah, like my products and services and my purpose on the planet is to help, is to help humanity. So it's very much about helping CEOs and influencers.
Right. And without commenting on any of the companies you might have touched, can
Yeah.
you pick a couple of examples out there that you just know that they're paying more attention than a typical company to how they're operating, how they're presenting themselves, and how they're inspiring, again, their audience? Can you give us just a couple sort of examples of that so we can relate as we follow along here?
Um, well, I think a lot of executives try to hide behind the mask of who they think they're supposed to be in the role of CEO or as an executive. And what people really want is to know who you really are. And while some people may not be at that place to know that who they really are is pure love, when they show up in who they are without the mask, and they are okay to be vulnerable about the things that didn't work and the things that they're struggling with, it brings that connection, right? It's not about misery loves company. No, it's not that. It's about just sharing the struggles so that everyone can be connected and working together for a common mission, a common goal, as opposed to just reaching sales. And yes, we have to reach sales because companies have to stay in business and companies have to be profitable. And I'm not disencouraging any of that, but it's, you know, it's that whole thing about the why behind it. And I think CEOs lose their way when their companies get big. They start out with a fire in their belly and they figure out a way to make that fire become something. And then when it becomes something, then the money comes, and then the cars and the houses and the this and the that and everything else comes. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. I welcome that for everyone. But it's the attachment that we have to those things that start to define ourselves. And I'm just here to say, you know, let's just take a step back from all of that. You've been successful as a CEO, you've done all these things, but now you have to also step away from those as thinking that they are you, because they're not you. Because in the moment of now, it's just now. You know,
has there been a company that's pulled it off yet? Patagonia, Ben Sherman shirts, a surf company. Have you seen it reflected in their culture full circle where they've gone that far yet?
I'm sure there's a lot of companies. I hesitate to say any particular names, because the minute I do will be the minute that there'll be a press release tomorrow that says that something wacky happened or whatever. But I mean, everybody's so yeah.
Is there an industry that you're watching closely that you think's on the leading edge of that? That's another way to ask it. Well, we're not getting into company names, but which industries are pushing the envelope? How about that?
Yeah. Well, I'm a psychedelic spokesperson. Like, I come from a straight and narrow background. I am a no drug policy girl. Like, drugs have never been on my radar other than occasional alcohol use. And in my book, I also talk about how I got to psychedelics, the unexpectedness of getting to psychedelics. But if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because I understood the power of flowers and the power of Mother Nature. And then plant-based medicines came in, you know, San Pedro, which is a cactus, you know, ayahuasca, which is a vine and a leaf brewed together, and, you know, things like bufo, which is venom from a toad's back. And so there's, you know, mushrooms, psilocybin. So there's all of these great modalities through Mother Nature that can help you break through. Psychedelics are never going to enlighten you. They're going to give you the North Star. And then you do the work, and then you do the integration work. So my big passion really is in the psychedelic realm and helping a lot of psychedelic CEOs and to get the narrative shifted around psychedelics so that the masses can understand that you don't have to be a hippie, and you don't have to worry about the stigma of, you know, I had stigma. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, and like that egg that got dropped in that pan, you know, and the whole ad campaign about this is your brain on drugs. I mean, it's there. Like, those programs are solid for a lot of people. And so I'm not saying go out and do a bunch of drugs. I'm saying, no, there's a sacred ceremony with the right setting and server that can provide you with an incredible breakthrough that helps shut down that default mode network so that you're not listening to the programs of the mind, and you can hear your soul speak. And then it gives you then you practice. After that, you practice. Then you come out of a journey and you practice and you integrate. And it's important to be in a safe space. It's important to have someone that's there as a sacred space holder, because a lot of things can happen in these other realms. And so I feel like, I mean, look, I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would ever be a psychedelic spokesperson, a herpes spokesperson. Like, I could have guessed the angels part, but not the other stuff. And it's all about, like, we just need to break through the trauma and the stigma and virus shame and just all of this stuff. And everybody gets that with COVID. Everybody knows what virus shame is. And people
have loosened up a lot. I mean, COVID was an educational thing. Forget about the fact that now Zoom is 100% or 1,000% accepted. So face-to-face is now the norm. FaceTime's been around forever, but it didn't take hold. So that was an incredible aspect or an outcome of COVID. But even COVID, the rigidity, everybody had certain viewpoints. It had to be this way. No, it was this way. Wait 6 months. The people who said A were then saying B, or blue was red was blue. We've all flip-flopped so much that I think we got a little more loose about COVID just from following that roller coaster ride. Because what was up today was down tomorrow. It was crazy. Now, plant-based medicines have come a long way too. It's like that Virginia Slims cigarette commercial. You come a long way, baby. Because now there's millions, if not tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of $millions in research going into this. And there's a lot of companies looking at this, probably even big pharma, because of what's always been there traditionally. But they're taking a hard look and taking it much more seriously. The medical community, the psychological or counseling communities, I mean, the research is just, the dollars are pouring in. So this has been going
Yeah.
on for, I'd say, a decade at least.
Yeah. Well, and just for a little plug, I mean, ketamine is already on the market. You can go to a ketamine clinic. MDMA is approved in Australia just recently, and MAPS is a nonprofit organization. Rick Doblin's been studying this for 10, 15 years, and he's got fast-tracked with FDA the MDMA. They just finished the phase 3. He studied it for PTSD, depression. In his focus has been on vets, and so we're fully anticipating an approval, FDA approval for MDMA. We've seen decriminalization of psilocybin mushrooms in Oregon and Colorado. And so there's, upwards over 250, I'll say proper, but I mean proper companies in the sense that some, many are traded on the stock exchange already, and their focus is 100% on psychedelic molecules. So yeah, there is a lot happening in this space, billions of dollars, people are really getting involved. In fact, Deepak Chopra was just on the Psychedelia magazine over here. So it's changing rapidly, but there's also a lot of things that need to be said around psychedelic usage that is really important too, because of what happens in the other realms. There's just it's a whole nother episode, but yeah, I feel very called to help with that education out in the public.
Speaking of plant-based medicine, is it time to blow a little bit of sage and have a little bit of the sage plant itself come through 2 screens? For those who have watched the show before, they've watched plenty of other guests catch the scent of sage through 2 screens. Beth's in California right now, and I'm in San Antonio, Texas. There's really no time or space. And so if one can just allow, and even if this is years in the future, there is lit sage from Whole Foods headquarters when I got it. Juniper Ridge, the bundles of sage, and there's a little bit of smoke, red-tailed hawk feather. My only advice is give yourself permission to let go. Ask angels, the universe, to make it nice and bring it to you. And Beth, can you just describe what you're getting? And then can you take it an extra step and have it whoosh you more?
Yeah. Well, immediately I do get just this scent. There's a little bit of sweetness in it, which I was kind of surprised about. And then I just felt like the top of my tongue felt a little bit dry. So that was like, oh, and it's nice because when you think about like smoke, it's not that kind of smoke. It's just a very calming feeling that it's like, it feels like reassurance. It feels like I'm not alone in the universe kind of feeling.
Nice. Very nice. And what I might do is put a photograph of just Joy up and see if she wants, or Joy and Charlotte, to see if they kick out a couple more topics, because you're doing great for us. You've covered a lot of ground. Bali was just absolutely fascinating. Thank you for that. And I got to stub this out, or I will have smoke in this room for the next half an hour. So 1 second. Okay. So 2 angels, you've already met angels on your own. You've met angels with me. We did it before the show, just so there's a little disclaimer, but here's the photograph for Joy. If you could get a personal compliment, a personal answer for something, and get a hug, and then ask for something you can share out loud for all of us right now.
The thing that comes to me is North Star. Follow the North Star. And what that means for me just is to just know that we're all connected. And even if that doesn't make sense, because the word oneness used to drive me absolutely nuts, because I was like, I love the idea and I'd like to say that we're all one, but I have no idea how that's possible until I did do psychedelics and I understood, I get it. And that's the North Star for me, is to remember that we are all one and that we do have an impact on everybody and everything energetically within our daily lives and in the multidimensional realms, and to just to have awareness about that and to think about how, the consciousness of how we impact other people. And sometimes it's as simple as smiling at a stranger, and you raise their oxytocin levels, they feel better, they feel connected, they feel seen. And you never know what that might do. It might stop somebody from doing something that's harmful. It might just mean that they then go smile at somebody else and raise somebody else's oxytocin levels. So yeah, that's what comes to me to say.
Beautiful. I love that part about the strangers. You're helping them with their validation. You're just showing compassion to yourself for getting out of what you know in that moment, plus to others. Okay. Charlotte, everybody's favorite teacher from childhood, with words meant to help you expand. If you're from Australia, Think of her as your third form teacher, but that's if you liked her. Okay, Charlotte, get something private, personal, and get a hug.
Okay.
And then something you can share with all of us as a topic.
Okay. What came to me was black hole, and how black holes, I don't know that much about black holes, but they're like everything and nothing all at the same time. So, and the blue was like just being held by the black hole, like, like some kind of comfort. Like I was surprised because blue sometimes means cold to me, but it didn't. It just meant very comforting, like kind of like, yeah, maybe because you said a hug, because I felt the hug around my back over my shoulders, and so it just felt like, yeah, just sitting in a nice hole.
Nice. And I totally forgot about Archangel Michael. We'll come back to the photos in a little bit, but let's do one more. And then we'll cover some more topics on spirituality across the board. Okay, Archangel Michael. And maybe get 2 topics from him, or just a reminder from him to all of us.
Okay.
Okay, what'd you get?
Don't dull your sparkle or your glimmer. Like the glow around you, don't dull it for anybody.
Very nice. Okay, tell us more about that. How have you been applying it on your journey? Because remember, the more you do, the more you can feel like you're tugged in a million directions. Yeah. And then it's easy to lose track of how it's so simple. It's in the moment, always. It's right in front of you. But then again, how do we do the forest from the trees?
Yeah. So what comes to say is that everyone is an angel, even when they look like a devil. They're here for your awakening, and it's usually the people that we love the most, that we're closest to, that we feel sometimes the deepest disappointments and the deepest scars and wounds, but they're not scars and wounds if you take what it is that they're here to help you learn. And then you can let go of the scars and wounds and just move through the energy of what it is, because oftentimes they're the people that are trying to hold you back from your journey so that you can build this spiritual toolbox to keep going on your journey. Because if you didn't experience the pain, you wouldn't know the bliss, right? If you don't know short, you don't know tall. So it's to give the contrast. And so don't try to hold them in this character. Just let it go. Just get the lesson and let it go. And that happens a lot in romantic relationships. That happens a lot in family relationships, because we have these expectations from these people that they're not going to hurt us. And if you can get beyond the idea of someone's hurting me, I'm not saying don't validate your own feeling. I'm saying go into that feeling, but don't be the victim of that feeling, because they're here to help you get in touch with something. Sometimes, we have to get angry to get a suppressed emotion out, because that's all anger is. It's just a suppressed emotion. So if someone makes you angry, just be thankful that you were able to be angry, to release whatever it is, and then move beyond the anger and not hold the anger and try to blame somebody for making you angry. So it's like, get deep into it and let it out and move beyond it.
So the 2 things that come to mind when you say all that is everything's your instruction, everything.
Yeah.
And then another one, love is in everything. Open your eyes, open your heart to actually appreciate it or see it. Those are some beautiful words that you had just now.
And the toughest part about all of that is that knowing that you are the creator of your life. So you created that character was going to come in and do that to you. And that's a hard one to swallow sometimes, when you really feel like, I would not ask for that in my life. It's like, but you did. And there's a reason for it. So just, navigate through it and then get beyond it. It's, don't wallow in it, feel it, experience it, but then move through it, because you did ask them to come in. You did ask them to break your heart. You did ask them to do this or that or whatever it is, so that you could experience life and you could build a toolbox and you could keep going and moving on and come back to, I like to call it, a blissfully neutral state.
Yeah.
Right? We're not always way up here, We're just like, how quickly can I come back to a neutral state when something happens to me, when I have an experience that feels less than ideal? How do I just get back to feeling connected and feeling whole and feeling in love and yeah, to that blissfully neutral state.
And by neutral, because I've heard you use this expression before, it's a key, it's a cornerstone for Beth Bell, who we have on right now, www.bethbell.me instead of .com. So bethbell.me for her website. But the blissfully neutral state is really finding a way to be in a center that you own, that's your authentic presence, that no outside external, happy or negative, could roil you or rock you. It's your authentic this lotus flower. Tell us more about this concept, because we really haven't covered that much in the show.
About the blissfully neutral state? Well, I think it is what I've said, which is when things happen to us, we want to blame the external world. And it's about coming back to just knowing that it's happening for a reason, and not getting so attached to why it happened, how it happened, or the self-judgment that happens, like, well, why did I make this happen? Or if I would have done this, shoulda, woulda, coulda. It's about making decisions that are based intuitively, those intuitive risk decisions, but then always know that you can't make a mistake. Like, are there things that we say, yeah, I wish I would have done that? Yeah, I'm sure there are. But the focus should be is I just make another decision. Right? So it doesn't have to be this heaviness of sitting and wallowing in something that we did. It's like, no, make a decision. And then if that doesn't feel right, then make another decision and keep follow. That's what kids do. They do what makes them happy, right? They make a decision, they make another decision, you know? And of course, there is a level of compassion and discernment that we want about, like, how are we impacting other people as we make those decisions? But we don't make a decision because of someone else. So we can still be empathic and compassionate with other people in our lives, right? To not drive them crazy with our, like, I'm following my heart now, I'm following my heart here, I'm going here, I'm going, because that can be crazy for people that are close to us because a lot of people can't handle the same level of unpredictability, right? People on the spiritual path, a lot of times, are getting more and more comfortable with unpredictability, not knowing what's coming next. And that's the comfortable place, is when you can actually be in that not knowing place. Yeah, it's great. And I've had a hard time with that, because I don't like to say I don't know, because I got programmed with, well, you better know, figure it out. No, you're smart enough, and it's like, well, actually, the not knowing feels really great, because that's like, oh, okay, then I'm in the childlike curiosity. And when you're in the childlike curiosity, then it's easier to get back to that blissfully neutral state, because then you're not doing the self-judgment, you're not blaming others, you're not in the storylines. You're just in the, well, this is just what it is. Just like the rice field worker. Well, this just is what it is. I just chose to come in as a rice field worker and work with, God and the land, and this is who I am, and I'm just here. And if I can help you and you can help me, right? So then you're just like in this more loving space and not in the mind of judgment. That's the blissful neutral state.
Some beautiful, beautiful points. Now, something that's been out obviously for decades is manifesting, or just bringing in desired outcomes that you want to have in your life. There's a lot of courses, workshops, seminars, institutes, professionals out there telling you how to try to put your focus on stuff to bring it in. And there's probably a whole nother way you treat the topic. Could you talk to us a little bit about, different audience members out there watching you right now have different outcomes they want to attract? It could be the soulmate or a loved one, or just more abundance, more financial abundance. Talk to us more about that entire concept and how everything else you've talked about, bring these two topics together for us, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be a big, get into workshops and do all these things, and I just feel like it's kind of an old model. It's like the only thing that you really want to do is listen to yourself, like listen to your higher self. So yes, there is a lot of value in all those. So I'm not discounting all the modules and workshops and seminars and sessions and retreats and all that, because they stimulate us. So do it, but only do it if you feel like innately within, this is the right thing for me. So another thing comes to mind to share. I got exposed to theta healing. I went to a Panchakarma cleanse with an Indian doctor in Bali. I laid on her table, and she, her medical assessment of me was through theta healing and using muscle testing. And so she would ask me to make a statement. My name is Beth Bell. And then my fingers would stay together, which meant true. My name is Pineapple. And it would go like this, right? And I was so fascinated because my mind, I was trying to track her, like, but she was going so fast and she was asking me all these things and she was getting all the answers she needed. And so I was just kind of like, okay, surrender, just let her do it. And then she said, everything was a repeat after me. She said, it's easy for me to ask for help. And I went, eh, and instantly tears came out of my eyes. And I was like, oh my God, where'd that come from? Right. And so she just got like right down to it. And I was like, wow. And so I've used that technique for years and years and years to a place now where I don't even have to actually use my fingers. I just see it in my mind. I just watch my fingers in my mind, whether it's a yes or a no. And if it's somewhere in between, it means I just need to reframe the question and ask it with more clarity because I'm too ambiguous in what I'm asking. So that I bring that up because if you're trying to decide if that retreat or that module or that whatever is right for you, if you start practicing one of these techniques, it helps too, because sometimes my mind is so busy, it's hard to quiet it, that this works for me. But anything that's going to help you go inward, anything that's going to help you connect to Mother Nature, those are the things that I think any psychedelic journeys with the right safe setting shaman with an integration coach afterwards, those are the things that are going to really just streamline you in. Otherwise, a lot of this stuff is there's still programs. There's still, like, yeah, I mean, I think the whole, The Secret comes to mind. So The Secret was a great thing, and The Law of Attraction is a great thing. But I really loved The Greatest Secret, which was the book that Rhonda wrote afterwards, because she realized that, The Secret and the Law of Attraction is still very much from the mind. It's like attracting things from the mind, which is okay, but it's about coming back to that I am awareness, I am consciousness, I am pure consciousness. That's what love is. That's the vibration of love, is just pure consciousness. And so she came back around with that, like, oh yeah, so let's just go to pure consciousness. You can still attract everything, but it's not from the mind and the desire and I want this or that. It's a inner stillness and in there. So I feel like those kinds of workshops and seminars and things where that it's about consciousness and lining yourself up, because no one has the key to your journey, because you're the creator of your journey and only you know what's right for you. And so start there as opposed to everybody else's techniques. I mean, look at their techniques. I talk about a lot of different modalities, and I specifically say this is not a how-to guide, because I know that for each individual person, they're going to find their way and they're going to navigate, and their characters and people are going to come in the way that they've planned it. I just kind of show what happened for me so that people cannot feel like the Lone Rangers out there, because sometimes it gets crazy and sometimes you question yourself and sometimes you go, wait, does this really make sense? And a lot of times it doesn't. And that's where a lot of times, you're still in the sweet spot, is when you're still moving forward, when some things like you don't have the logical mind involved. Look, we still have to use our logical mind. I'm not saying to go, totally crazy. I'm just saying that, yeah, it starts to come into balance. So again, I've digressed a little bit from your original question.
It's good stuff right now. If somebody out there has done the courses, done the seminars, read the books, they've spent a lot of time on this stuff, but they still feel like they're on the edge, they're not quite in their center. Are there 3 steps? Are there 2 steps? If it's musical chairs, can you shut the music off for everybody and take 2 chairs away suddenly? How can you help a person get to that last chair, which is their heart? How can you help them get seated to really pay attention in the moment and get focused? Let's say between now and Sunday, what are just a few steps that they could pump the brakes, and by Sunday, they could have a little more clarity? It could be anything. They're hopping on a plane going to Bali. I think that's the last choice. But give us something else that's more practical for anybody who's watching.
Well, what I was going to say before you said about more practical was explore the idea of a psychedelic journey if you're looking for that next step, because what it does do is it gives you a break from your mind. And if you haven't experienced that yet, once you do, you see it so clearly how your mind is in the driver's seat, and just getting a reprieve from the default mode network and helping your neuroplasticity to go back to that childlike curiosity, it's a great thing to do, but it's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that's going to happen probably most likely in a week, because I very much encourage, just because your friend says, oh, I'm doing an ayahuasca journey, that's not an intuitive risk to take, say, I'm going to do it because they're doing it. No, that's not what I'm talking about. You get that hit and you say, oh, how do I feel about that? You do take the internal journey, and then you wait and you see, like, what else comes to me? You talk to the server, you feel into their vibration and their energy, and you feel into that. And then you look for, these different signs, right? So that's intuitive risk taking. It's not like, oh, I got this hit, go, done. No, it's like, I got it. Give me something more to either confirm it or to let it flow out, and maybe it comes back around later. So when I talk about psychedelics, I'm talking about it from that standpoint, not just like, oh, somebody said that there's something tomorrow night, let's go.
It's a really big step. Taking that step is a massive, if it was a cultural indigenous thing, this would be like coming of age when you're a teenager being brought into adulthood. It's a very important or big step to be carefully respected. So
so that leads me to writing intentions, right? Writing intentions of what do I intend to want in my life. But I think coupled with that, and even more importantly, is how do I want to feel, right? Because at the end of the day, everything's about how we want to feel. And usually it's really basic, and it's that we want to feel happy and we want to feel love, right? But feeling love from someone else is different than feeling love inside. And that's an important differentiating factor, because real pure love is always within you. Other people just come in to reflect it back to you. So it's wanting to be in touch with that inner peace and love, not that I'm just going to bring in people to make me think that love is outside of me. That's, look, romantic partners, children, pets, all these things are great things that help us know our own love, but really knowing our own love and not being attached to other things that we think bring us love is super important. So I would say to sit in the feelings of how you want to feel. That's what brings everything to us.
Is it as simple as getting a throw pillow, beach towel, and sitting on a wooden floor somewhere and just going full stop? Do you have a couple practical tips on that front? Is it getting out on the grass if it's not Iowa in the middle of winter? How would you go full stop? If you only had 10 minutes, what's a surefire way to face ourselves, which is the last place in a decade? We could try, but for a whole decade, we might not be able to, skip the decade and ignore ourselves. We would try.
Yeah, well, what I would do is I'd take my dog Lily, we'd go to the beach and we'd look out at the ocean. Now I recognize not everyone can do that. So I would say there are so many great meditations. One of the things that, she's been around forever, but Abraham Hicks, there's a ton of different rampages. And so sometimes that helps me to shift my state, right? And everybody pretty much has access to a phone or YouTube. And so there's some really great high vibe music. I think if you can in your community find like a sound healing and go to a bowl healing, I know that's not like a, in the next 10 minutes kind of thing, but getting in nature is the next 10 minutes thing, no matter where you are. Getting on YouTube and finding a high vibe, whether it's an Abraham Hicks or it's something, some kind of a Hertz, sound meditation type soundtrack that just helps you switch. Those are really easy things to do, but it's switch your outer state to help switch your inner state. Because if you're just going to sit in your shit, you're going to stay there. If you don't change your external environment, then it's pretty hard to unlock the circuitous loops of thoughts that you're caught in, because that's all they are, is recognize it's just a thought that my mind is replaying over and over and over and over again.
And so how do we let go of our limiting beliefs? Because that's really, in a way, what part of this is about. How do we even spot them? How do we let go of them? Slice this a whole different way. We've touched on it, but now again, you've just hit on a nice little flow of topics. But talk to us about limiting beliefs and how can we just ease up on buying into the way they roll?
Well, what comes to me is fear or love. So always ask yourself, where is this coming from? This thought, this belief, is it out of fear or is it out of love? And they're always it's tricky sometimes. You think that it's out of love, but then you go, oh, but when I really go underneath that thought, I'm having that thought because I fear scarcity, or I fear, losing love, or whatever it is. So if it's not love, it's not real.
And if you
And
can let it go and really genuinely let it go, but it comes back, there's a chance that then it was a heart-centered thing.
yeah, yeah. What you
Interesting.
love the most, you let go. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, Beth Bell, tell us a little more in any direction. Pick a topic, or would you rather have some Native American chiefs your way? Dull Knife, Red Shirt, Geronimo,
Okay.
historical, your choice. You can pick another topic, or we can get topics from them. But these are unconditional love spirit guides. I believe you've met them before. Other guests on the show have
Yeah.
met them before. They're like
Yeah.
long lost uncles for us all. And I know, I don't know if I've said this, but my dad died in 1970. They kind of came into the picture through art on a wall. It's a long story, but they kind of kicked off my journey 12 years ago. But let's do Dull Knife. He's wisdom with some humor, unconditional love spirit guide. And here's his face for you. You can hear some advice personally for you, get a beautiful hug. And if you want to catch one of those sacred smells in the air, a sage, a sweetgrass, juniper, cedar, tobacco, catch something in the air. We don't have to light sage to do this. And if you get a topic that he's giving you to talk
Yeah.
about,
He is. He's giving me the topic, don't take it so seriously. Because he looks like he's really serious, but he's like, it's not. And then interesting, like how you had the card, it was catching the triangle of the flag up above. So it was like out of his head was sort of like just go up and like kind of raise yourself up out of the seriousness of situations. It doesn't mean don't honor, like if something really serious is happening, but it's just saying don't hold on to it with such seriousness, because it too shall pass. Everything does.
ooh, okay. Again, batting 1,000. Not that we're judging any of it, but you've really said some great stuff here. Okay, Red Shirt, gentlest mom in the world. He's really compassion, compassion, compassion. Super soft spoken. Anyone who's gone through a lot of issues, health, divorce, job loss, they always gravitate to him.
It's about character. It's about taking everything that's happened to you and recognize that it is your wisdom. Like everything that's happened is for your wisdom to share with others, not your wounds. So stay in the wisdom of what's happened as opposed to the wound of what's happened.
Hmm. Trusting that you're perfectly good where you are in this exact moment. Good luck with that for anyone listening, because you're like, wait, what? This happened to me. Are you kidding? Okay. Geronimo, and last but not least, out of 170 plus figures, this guy steals the show. He's like a wily Zen master, even though I know we're talking Native American culture, Native American tradition. He's action, dry wit, lightning bolt, just do it, like a Marine Corps drill sergeant, but he also is improper. The first two are proper, formal, yes, no. He's like, yeah, nah, duh. You already know the answer. He's a little smart alecky and can do any lingo from the 1950s, the 1930s, Bowery Boys. He's incredible that way for how he just gets
Okay, I got
part of a matter. What'd you get?
use your stubbornness for your spiritual soul's plan. So, and that feels very specific probably to me, but I think it's to everyone out there, because if they're listening to your show, I know they're on their spiritual path and I know that they're looking for answers. But it's about use your stubbornness, in that sometimes I persevere with things and people are like, can you just stop already? But it's like, I just know somehow deeply within me. And then sometimes there's places where I've pushed my stubbornness and I didn't need to, but it's about like really owning what you know, even when other people can't see what you know and they don't know what you know, and not letting them take you down for what you know, but they can't see. Because that's really hard on the journey. When you're awakening, you start to see things that other people don't know, and so they want to tell you you're silly, you're crazy, it's your imagination, it's this, that, the other. And then that, eventually it does kind of, especially when they're people that you really love. But usually it's just because they just don't know and they're insecure about what they don't know that you do. And so, that's like, I don't know, maybe stubborn wasn't the right word, but it's certainly the word that came forward really strongly for me. So it's like, in a good way, stay in that, that feisty inner child place of, I know this. I know that I want this now, or I know that I'm supposed to do this now, but not from a me way, but from spiritually selfish and selfless way, where, because you know that,
Persevere,
yeah,
persevere.
yeah, persevere. It's a great, yeah, that's a persevere through, because there's something in it for everyone. When you step through a limiting belief, when you move beyond it, it takes people a long time sometimes to figure it out, but it does blow the doors open for people. And some people aren't ready to have that belief be shattered, especially when it comes to like inner family system dynamics or relationship dynamics. People aren't ready for that. And
Right.
that's where you have to kind of go, okay, well then what do I do with that? When they're not ready, we sit with them and we hold the space. And then there does come a time sometimes where we have to make a move.
Or yeah, and that whole the way you think the situation is then as you're transforming, you'd be surprised if it's a year, 10 years later, 2 months later, how that person that you thought was going to be a
Yeah.
certain way has flipped. They've gotten
Yeah.
into a car wreck, they've had an illness. It might not be that
Yeah.
drastic, but growth happens in the strangest of ways. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
It's Casablanca. I like to say this.
Yeah.
If it's Casablanca, I'm shocked to see there's gambling going on in this
Yeah.
casino. So change happens, period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it also makes me think, to take us back to the family constellation work that I spoke about. What was so fascinating about that is that people would, come back the next day and say like, "Oh, something got healed with a parent or whatever." And the parent that hasn't talked to them in like 10 years would just out of the blue call them. Right. So you knew that the energy was released from that ancestral lineage, and the connection was made. And then all of a sudden something changed. And so it was such incredible validation for me at that time to see, across miles. I mean, I knew it to be true, but I hadn't experienced it to be true sometimes. And so when we get the experiences, we go, oh, thank you. Thank you for just, showing me an example so I can actually see that happen.
So it's like honoring the invisible flow of love that's a constant, but I'm going to say it the Beth Bell way. Also honoring the multidimensional connections that, and back to what you said, how we're all connected.
Yeah.
The oneness, but there was another way to say it.
Another way that I was saying it, the oneness.
Yeah, remember we didn't like oneness. We like that other way to say it. Remember oneness, one with all was a lot. Remember that earlier. It was easy to reject that phrase. That's okay. Okay, so why don't you do this? Is there a last, like a couple of exercises or just ways that people can slow down during their day? Is it over breakfast? Is it taking the shower before bed? Is it getting away from devices before bed? First thing in the morning, tea before you've even brushed your teeth, have a tea ceremony. What can people do to pump that brake and get back to an existing center that we blow off most of the time?
Yeah, well, a couple of things, because I got so many things when you're asking questions. For me, I really do like to have that sip of tea in the morning and just be present with the tea. So that works for me. But what first came to me is, and this is such an easy one that a lot of times we don't do, eat in presence. Turn the TV off. Don't bring the phone to the table. Just sit in presence and think about what it took for that salad or whatever you're eating to get to the table, because a lot of people, a lot of lives have touched it, whether it's the picker, the trucker, the fuel that it took to get there, the person that put it on the shelf, the person that checked it out at the grocery store. And when we sit and honor just like what it actually, what it took to get this to us, this, what seems like this simple meal, it brings a lot more meaning to it. And it brings a lot more enjoyment to it, because a lot of times we're eating because we're hungry and we're just like trying to have it be our fuel, but it can be our jet fuel if we recognize all of the beautiful. So if you're sitting home alone and you're really sad and you feel totally lonely and alone in the universe, just be one with your food, because all these people supported you to eat that food before it even got to you. So if you just can feel into that support that goes out there, you're being supported on so many levels all the time with so many things that we just don't even recognize. So that's something for me. I don't know. I just feel like I hear a lot of friends talking about watching shows and things while they're eating, and I'm just like, oh, why would you do that? It's like such a beautiful experience. Or sometimes I'll pull a card and then I'll sit with the card while I'm eating the
What
food.
type of card are we talking about? Which type of deck is this?
Well, I really like the Osho Zen deck. I like that one a lot. I also like, there's a Starseed deck by Rebecca Campbell that I really, really like. And I do have an Amazon store, Positive Inspirations, but all of my things that I recommend are on there, these decks included. I also have a Rumi deck but that I don't do over food because that's a really long reading, but it's beautiful because it's always about self-love and about being in touch with your beloved, which is you at your highest level. So I really like the Rumi deck. Those are my favorites. Those are my favorite decks right now. And then I also have an Archangel deck, but I haven't used that as much over the years. I used it originally, but not so much now.
And do you have one more angel story for us? Something where you know it was angels, you either saw angels or you found something, or you just, the footprint was there. I'm not talking literal footprint, but it was clearly angels doing the work here. Can you share? I mean, you've had a lot of these experiences over time. Can we hear an inspirational story?
The one that comes to mind is wasn't my guardian angel per se, but I was on one of my nevers was I said I would never take a cruise, and and then the next thing I knew, Hay House emailed me and said we're doing a cruise, and I'm like, oh my gosh, with all my favorite authors at the time, it was way back in, I don't know, 2005 or something, and so I signed up for this cruise, and I ended up realizing that there was multiple sessions on the cruise. I was part of one particular topic, and that was 8 hours a day pretty much. But then when I checked in, there was also this like other spirits, other lives, and all these different topics. And I was like, oh, I can add on a whole nother set on the cruise. So I did. And because, I still was kind of like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about connecting. And so I was in Brian Weiss's session. He's a famous hypnotherapist. And I was late to the session because I'd come from the gym. I had my gym clothes on, and there was like one seat left. And so I like had to crawl over the seat, sit in the seat. They started the session, just after I sat down. And he said, okay, I'm going to take you into a meditative state. And then I'm going to ask you, before you get into the meditative state, pick a partner, someone you don't know, someone close to you. And there was this beautiful older woman, I don't know, let's just say 70, next to me. And so I looked at her and said, partner. Yeah. Okay. So we were partners. And so Brian took us into this meditation, and then all of a sudden I could see in my hand, in my mind's eye, I could see this ring, like a wedding ring, like a wedding band. And it was like this ring of fire. And then all these things came to me, like this waterfall, these silver roses, like lavender silver roses. And then there was the Statue of Liberty, like holding the torch. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all crazy. Like, I don't even know what this stuff means, but just stop with the mind, just see it, just see it, just see it. And then I felt this presence. It's like funny, it makes me emotional when I think about it even today. I felt this presence before me, and I said, what's your name? And he said, George. And then Brian said, okay, let's come back. Da, 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 da. So I was like, so I look at this lady, and I start telling her all these things, and she just looks at me, and her eyes are getting bigger and bigger. And I'm thinking, because I'm just kind of dumping on her like all the things that I saw. And then I said, and then I felt this presence, and I said, what's your name? And he said, George. And she just burst into tears. And she basically told me the story that she came on this cruise because she had lost her soulmate, who was George. And she wanted to be in touch with him. And that's why she was coming to all these seminars. And there he was. And I felt so honored that I could experience it, that I could bring him into the room for her. And I was just like, so again, helped me to be really comfortable with the other side, with people's souls, right? Whether they're dead or alive, that it's okay to talk to these entities, and that I'm not crazy doing it. So I think that was a big shifter for me, but it was like the gift for me was her reaction and how much it meant to her. And I just was like, wow, that's just amazing. And then I don't really practice that to speak to people on the other side. That's not really what I feel I'm called to do, but I'm honored whenever it happens. And I've had many other situations where people have come through me to other loved ones. And so, just every time it does, it just helps me to feel into how guided we are in every moment by so many guides, spirit, souls, entities, even our loved ones in body that are with us on a soul level in a way that we just don't even know. So yeah, it's
amazing.
gets to be a tough world sometimes, but it doesn't need to be when we really connect in.
Can you mention your show again and when it
Yeah,
is? You had already
yeah,
done that earlier, but just tell us
yeah.
again how people can tune in. They can ask questions as well.
Yep. It's Unravel Your Mind, but it's on my YouTube channel, which is at Beth Bell Live. Sundays 11:11. You can find me on, the channel is probably the best, but you can also find me on Instagram at Queen Bliss B. You can find me on Facebook and type me a little private message if you're not going to be there for the show, but you want the question to be answered. Yeah, so I look forward to seeing everybody on there. It's so much fun. Lots of
That's
great stuff.
awesome. Okay, one last angel, just because when you were telling us about the cruise, and I want to come back to George, or just
Yeah.
hear privately something from Charlotte and say, got it when you got it, about that whole experience, and get a compliment. Got it?
Yeah, yeah.
And is there a little portion of it you can share? I think a lot of it was meant for you, but what did you get that you could share out loud?
I just got bravo for stepping into the multidimensional realities. Just like that, stepping through the fear of it. And I felt like that was for everybody. Like, so if you're listening, it's yeah, step into it. Even if you're not familiar, you don't think you can do it, or just ask for help. And that was something you've always said to me in all of our conversations, is ask for help, ask for help, ask your guides. And it's something that I've been implementing more recently, because I realized how much I wasn't asking my guides, because I just was like, oh, I'm just going to oneness. And it's like, between here and oneness, even though everything is an illusion, our higher self has the form of guides for us that helps us navigate here in this lower dimensional world. So yeah, so it is important to connect into guides.
Yeah, I think it was 2 Januaries ago, Charlotte, and this is just going to be a lifelong lesson for me. It's ask more, ask more, ask more. And we all want details, and you should get all your details.
Yeah.
But in the same breath, it's let go of as many details as you can.
Yeah.
And in there is somewhere some truth about operating daily. It's just this one of those pendulums that you see in music to keep the time. I forgot the name of that thing. And so you're the pendulum swinging back and forth between here and here. Good luck remembering to remember, if you can remember, when you remember. Well, Beth Bell, it's been awesome having you on the show. Any last words of advice for us, just to keep it real simple, keep it really in the heart? What can you leave us with?
Things that I've already said. Only love is real, and you're only here to awaken. Look at everybody and everything as an opportunity to awaken to another level of who you really are, not who you think you are.
Beautiful. Okay, well, look, we're looking forward to having you back next year when you've got that next project you want to talk about. You've done a wonderful job for us today, though. You've given us a lot of insight. I know the audience has been appreciative. I know they're going to hit the subscribe button on this show, and I also know they're going to put compliments down for Beth, because I think she's been very brave, very insightful, shared a lot of her personal path. And I think it's really come through on this show. So for the first time, I'm putting it this way on the show. So I really would love to see people put beautiful compliments down so she can see those as well.
I also want to give
Yes.
a little plug for Angels, Herpes, and Psychedelics, Unraveling the Mind to Unveil Illusions. So you can find that on Amazon.
I love it. And on Amazon, it's been highly ranked in the past. I know that always fluctuates. It's still pretty highly ranked. Check out her book. Well, thank you, Beth Bell, in California, and it's bethbell.me, M-E, for her website.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for being on.